Imagine this: a wandering teacher in dusty sandals, speaking not to kings or priests, but to fishermen, farmers, and the poor. His words are simple, about seeds, lamps, vineyards, lost coins. On the surface, they sound like children's stories, fragments of peasant life. And yet, these parables have endured for over 2,000 years, whispered in temples, studied in monasteries, and debated in countless gatherings of scholars and mystics alike. Why? Because hidden beneath their simplicity lies a code, a spiritual cipher that few truly grasp. The parables of Jesus are not just moral tales. They are keys to unlock higher states of consciousness, secret doorways into the kingdom within. Every image, every metaphor, every paradox was deliberately chosen, veiled in common speech, so that only those with awakened eyes could see, and only those with attuned ears could hear. As Jesus himself declared, "To you it has been given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given." These were not words of exclusion. They were an invitation to pierce the veil. But what if we have missed it? What if centuries of doctrine, translation, and institutional power have buried the true essence of these messages? The parable of the mustard seed is not just about growth. It is about the explosive potential of divine consciousness within you. The story of the prodigal son is not merely about forgiveness. It is an allegory of the soul's exile into matter and its return to the source. The hidden treasure, the pearl of great price, these are not about possessions but about gnosis, the priceless knowledge of the self, hidden in the field of existence. In this exploration, we are not reading scripture like theologians. We are decoding it like mystics. We will step into the ancient world where symbols carried cosmic weight, where stories cloaked truths too dangerous to speak openly. We will uncover why these teachings were given in veiled form, and more importantly, what they mean for us today, for anyone seeking inner awakening, spiritual clarity, and freedom from the illusions of the material world. So prepare yourself. This is not the Sunday school version. This is the esoteric current that flows beneath the surface of Jesus' words. And once you glimpse it, you will never hear these parables the same way again. To understand the hidden depth of Jesus' parables, we must first step back, far beyond the familiar church pews, beyond centuries of translations, councils, and interpretations, to the world in which these words were first spoken. First-century Judea was not a quiet, isolated land. It was a crossroads, a turbulent meeting point of cultures, philosophies, and spiritual traditions. Greek philosophy still echoed through the Mediterranean, Persian mysticism lingered from older empires, and Jewish mystics whispered Kabbalistic visions in desert caves. In this environment, spiritual language was layered and symbolic. The rabbis spoke in midrash, weaving scripture with metaphor. The Essenes, an ascetic sect, encoded their wisdom in allegory, hiding divine secrets from the uninitiated. Even in Greek schools, philosophers like Plato used myths and parables to cloak higher truths. This was the intellectual and spiritual climate in which Jesus taught, a world where words were never just words, but doorways to deeper realities. The parables, then, were not accidental. They were deliberate instruments of concealment and revelation. To the casual listener, they were lessons in morality. To the seeker, they were maps pointing inward, guiding one toward gnosis, the direct, lived knowledge of the divine spark within. This was not merely about religion as we know it today, but about transformation, the awakening of consciousness. Yet, over time, the esoteric layers were gradually obscured. As the early Christian movement spread across the Roman Empire, its mystical roots were increasingly overshadowed by the need for order, authority, and uniformity. The parables, once whispered in symbolic tones, were flattened into literal teachings. The allegories of inner awakening became moral instructions, and the secret code of the kingdom within was largely forgotten. This forgetting was not unique to Christianity. Across cultures, ancient wisdom has often been hidden, misunderstood, or suppressed. Egyptian hieroglyphs were once dismissed as decorative art until their symbolic depth was rediscovered. Eastern sutras were long seen as riddles until meditative practice revealed their experiential truth. The same fate befell Jesus' parables. They became sermons for the masses, rather than initiations for the few. Philosophically, the parables reflect an eternal truth recognized by mystics across time. The outer story is a mirror for an inner reality. A seed falling on rocky ground is not just agriculture. It is the soul's struggle to take root in a distracted mind. A lamp hidden under a basket is not household advice. It is the divine spark buried beneath layers of fear, ego, and conditioning. Why then were these truths hidden? Perhaps because sacred knowledge is powerful, and power in the wrong hands can destroy. Or perhaps because, as every mystic has known, truth cannot simply be told, it must be experienced. To those unready, the parables remain simple stories. To those prepared, they open like flowers, revealing dimensions of meaning that grow with the seeker's own awakening. It is in this context, between the ordinary and the eternal, that we now return to the parables, not as historians or theologians, but as seekers of hidden wisdom. We are not merely asking, what did Jesus say? But rather, what was he truly pointing toward? Let us begin with the parable of the mustard seed. On the surface, it is a simple teaching. The kingdom of heaven is like the tiniest of seeds, which grows into the greatest of shrubs, sheltering the birds of the air. For centuries, this has been interpreted as a message of faith, small belief producing great results. But esoterically, the mustard seed represents something far more intimate, the latent spark of divine consciousness hidden within every human being. The seed is small because the divine spark, when veiled by the illusion of matter, is nearly imperceptible. To the unawakened eye, it is nothing. And yet, when nurtured, this seed has the power to grow into a living tree of consciousness, a bridge between earth and heaven. The birds that rest in its branches are not mere creatures, but symbols of liberated thoughts, higher states of awareness that finally find refuge in the awakened self. This pattern repeats across many of Jesus' parables. The imagery is drawn from everyday life, but the essence is alchemical. Take the parable of the leaven, where a small amount of yeast transforms an entire batch of dough. To the esoteric mind, this is the mystery of inner transmutation. When the spark of awakening is stirred within, it spreads through the whole being, changing not just belief but the very fabric of one's consciousness. Then there is the parable of the lamp hidden under a basket. On the surface, it exhorts us to share goodness openly. But beneath the surface, it speaks of the eternal flame, the inner light of awareness, trapped under the weight of ego, fear, and conditioning. The mystical command here is not only to share your light with others, but first to uncover it, to remove the basket of illusion, so that the self may shine unobstructed. Consider also the parable of the treasure hidden in a field. A man discovers it, sells all he has, and buys that field. On one level, it is about sacrifice for the sake of something valuable. But the treasure is not gold, it is gnosis, the knowledge of the divine within. The field is the field of life, the material existence in which this treasure is buried. Only the seeker willing to relinquish the distractions of worldly attachments can uncover it fully. Each of these parables encodes the same truth. The kingdom of heaven is not a place in the sky, reserved for the afterlife. It is an inner state of being, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be discovered through awakening. And this is why Jesus often ended his parables with the phrase, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." The words were never meant for everyone, at least not immediately. They were veils, requiring a shift in perception before their meaning could pierce the heart. What is striking, then, is how universal this method is. The Buddha spoke in parables, using the lotus and the wheel. The Sufi mystics taught in poetry, hiding their truths in tales of lovers and wine. The Hindu seers wrapped their insights in stories of gods and demons. All understood a timeless law. When truth is spoken too directly, it is resisted. When it is hidden in story, it bypasses the rational mind and plants itself in the soul, just like a seed. Thus, the parables are not mere lessons, they are living initiations. When you hear them, you are being invited not simply to understand, but to awaken. If part 1 revealed the seeds of esoteric wisdom, part 2 will uncover the more intricate architecture. the deeper currents flowing beneath the parables that seem paradoxical, unsettling, or even strange. These are the parables that resist easy moralization, the ones that hint at mysteries far beyond ethics or social instruction. Let us begin with one of the most famous, the parable of the prodigal son. On the surface, it is about forgiveness. A son wastes his inheritance on reckless living, returns in shame, and is welcomed home by his father. The lesson, according to tradition, is God's unconditional mercy. Yet esoterically, this parable is an allegory of the soul itself. The inheritance is the divine spark, the portion of spirit granted to each soul before entering the world of matter. The far country is incarnation, the descent into the material plane, where the soul squanders its essence through identification with pleasures, ego, and illusion. The famine represents the inevitable emptiness that follows when the soul is cut off from its source. And the return home, covered in rags, broken yet humbled, is the soul's awakening, its turning back toward the eternal Father. The feast is not simply forgiveness. It is reunion, reintegration, the ecstatic return to divine consciousness. Notice too the elder brother, who resents the celebration. Esoterically, this figure symbolizes the unawakened ego, the part of the self that clings to rigid righteousness and cannot comprehend grace. Thus, the parable does not only describe God's mercy, it dramatizes the entire cycle of spiritual exile and return, a cycle echoed in countless mystical traditions. Another profound parable is that of the wise and foolish virgins. 10 maidens wait for the bridegroom, 5 bring oil for their lamps, while 5 neglect it. When the bridegroom arrives at midnight, only the prepared ones enter the wedding feast. Literal interpretations focus on vigilance for the end times. But esoterically, the oil represents spiritual energy, the refined substance of consciousness cultivated through discipline, meditation, and inner work. The lamp is the vessel of the self, and the midnight arrival of the bridegroom symbolizes the sudden moment of awakening, which comes unannounced. Those who have cultivated inner light are ready. They carry the oil of gnosis and can enter union with the bridegroom, the higher self or the divine. Those without preparation are left in darkness, not because they were excluded arbitrarily, but because awakening cannot be borrowed. No one else can give you the oil. It must be earned through personal practice. Here the hidden warning is clear. Awakening is urgent, and delay has consequences. Even the stranger parables, such as the unjust steward who is praised for his cunning, contain esoteric layers. They suggest that the qualities of sharpness, vigilance, and creativity, when applied inwardly, are necessary for spiritual attainment. The kingdom does not open to the passive. It opens to those who, like alchemists, use every fragment of life's chaos as material for transformation. What makes these parables especially powerful is their universality. The prodigal son mirrors the Hindu story of the soul's journey through samsara. The parable of the virgins echoes the Sufi emphasis on polishing the lamp of the heart. The hidden treasure in the field resonates with the Buddhist image of a jewel concealed in a lotus. These stories are not confined to Christianity. They are part of the perennial wisdom, clothed in familiar garments for a specific people and time. And yet, Jesus' genius was to encode all of this in ordinary language: seeds, lamps, coins, bread, vineyards. By doing so, he democratized the mysteries, placing cosmic truths in the hands of fishermen and shepherds. The catch, of course, was that only those with awakened perception could decode them. To others, they remained quaint tales, moral lessons, nothing more. This is the paradox at the heart of the parables. They hide by revealing, and they reveal by hiding. They are mirrors. What you see in them depends entirely on the eyes you bring. It is one thing to admire the beauty of these parables as spiritual art. It is another to allow them to shape your inner life. Their true power is not unlocked through intellectual debate or endless commentary. It is awakened when you live them. Esoteric wisdom is never meant to remain abstract. It must become embodied. Take the parable of the mustard seed. If this is the divine spark within, then the practice is to cultivate it deliberately. Each day, through meditation, prayer, or stillness, you water that seed. You guard it from the weeds of distraction, the stones of doubt, and the scorching sun of fear. Ask yourself, what is the smallest seed of higher awareness in me, and how am I nurturing it? The parable of the lamp under a basket calls for radical honesty. What light within you have you hidden out of fear of judgment, rejection, or failure? To live this parable is to remove the coverings, to speak your truth, to shine your gifts, to let your inner flame radiate even if the world resists. The basket is not society alone. It is the inner voices of doubt that must be lifted away. The parable of the treasure hidden in the field demands sacrifice. If the treasure is divine consciousness, then what distractions, habits, or attachments must you sell in order to buy the field of awakening? This is not about abandoning life, but about rearranging priorities. Spiritual gold requires investment, of attention, of intention, of devotion. Every time you choose depth over distraction, you are purchasing that field anew. The parable of the Prodigal Son invites reflection on your own exile and return. Where in your life have you wandered far from your essence, chasing illusions? And how might you, even in brokenness, turn back toward the inner Father, the higher self that has never abandoned you? To practice this parable is to forgive yourself, to walk back home without shame, and to trust that the feast of reunion is waiting. And the parable of the wise and foolish virgins demands vigilance. Ask yourself, what oil am I storing? Do I cultivate practices that strengthen my inner light, or do I live passively, assuming there will always be time later? This parable urges urgency, not panic, but presence. Awakening comes like the bridegroom at midnight, unexpected, sudden. Preparation is not tomorrow's task, it is today's. Together, these parables form a spiritual manual disguised as simple stories. They are not commands from outside, but mirrors of inner work. Nurture your seed, uncover your lamp by your field, return to your source, and prepare your lamp with oil. If practiced, these stories cease to be tales from 2,000 years ago. They become living forces guiding your own transformation. Practical application, then, is not about memorizing verses or debating doctrines. It is about letting the parables work on you like seeds in the soil of your heart. They grow quietly, invisibly, until suddenly the tree bursts forth, the lamp shines, the treasure is uncovered, the feast begins. The parables of Jesus were never meant to be mere moral stories, nor were they simply agricultural metaphors for an ancient audience. They are coded invitations, maps pointing inward, mirrors reflecting the state of your own soul. To the unready, they remain quaint fables. But to the seeker, they are living initiations, whispering the same truth in many forms. The kingdom of heaven is within you. When Jesus spoke of seeds, lamps, treasures, and weddings, he was not giving abstract teachings. He was describing the inner journey of awakening. The seed is your hidden potential. The lamp is your inner flame. The treasure is your divine essence. The wedding feast is the ecstatic union between the human and the eternal. These are not promises for a distant afterlife. They are realities available here and now, if you have ears to hear. Yet, as we've seen, these truths are veiled. They cannot be forced upon anyone. They must be discovered, uncovered, lived. That is why the parables endure. They are timeless mirrors, always reflecting back exactly where you are on your path. To some, they speak of morality. To others, they reveal transformation. And to the awakened, they disclose the mysteries of the soul's return to its source. So the question is no longer, what do these parables mean? The deeper question is, what do they awaken in you? The next time you hear these stories, listen not only with your mind, but with your heart. Ask yourself, what seed is waiting to grow in me? What light have I hidden under a basket? What treasure lies buried in the field of my own life? And am I ready, truly ready, to keep my lamp filled with oil when the midnight hour arrives? Because in the end, the parables are not just about Jesus' time, nor about ancient fields and lamps. They are about you, about your journey, your awakening, your return. They are sacred whispers across centuries, reminding you of who you really are, a bearer of divine light, called to uncover the hidden kingdom within. The invitation remains the same as it was 2,000 years ago. He who has ears to hear, let him hear.